What happens when the most successful driver in history detects a failure that no one at Ferrari wanted to see for an entire season? And what happens when your partner realizes that he has been running on the brink of an accident without knowing it? The curtain fell in Abu Dhabi, but Ferrari did not finish the season. He closed it with more questions than answers, and with a feeling of crisis that not even the checkered flag could hide. While the other teams took advantage of the post-season tests to collect data for 2026, Ferrari was facing a truth that had been silently brewing for months. Its car was not only inefficient, it was structurally defective. And the person in charge of setting off that alarm was Lewis Hamilton. Following the December 9th test at Yas Marina, SF25 telemetry revealed a critical failure. The monocoque structure, at its junction with the front axle, suffered abnormal bending under conditions of high sustained lateral load. This was not something that could be detected in wind tunnels or simulators. It only manifested itself on the track in fast and demanding corners, when the maximum aerodynamic load generated a type of stress that no previous calculation had anticipated. The key word here is rigidity. In Formula One, structural rigidity is one of the invisible pillars of performance. A chassis that flexes outside the permitted margins, even minimally, breaks the aerodynamic balance. In the case of the SF25, this bending caused a loss of load on the front axle, which generated a chain of destabilization. The laminar flow under the car was interrupted, the rear load was affected, and the result was a car that literally stopped sticking to the ground. When Hamilton reported on the radio, something bent in the front and broke the back. It was neither an exaggeration nor an emotional justification. It was the exact phrase that described a complex technical phenomenon, which only a pilot with his level of sensitivity could detect in real time. His experience was the key for engineers to pay attention to what for months had been dismissed as a setup problem or piloting style. But the most worrying thing is that this anomaly was not detected by the simulation systems prior to the start of the season. What does this mean? That Ferrari built a car with a structural defect invisible to its own control methods. This raises a bigger problem. How many more errors are hiding beneath the surface by blindly relying on simulated data? Even more serious was discovering that this flexing of the chassis not only affected the aerodynamics, but also generated a type of vibration that resonated with the rear suspension. In physical terms, this created a longitudinal micro-instability that turned the car into a death trap in certain cornering phases. Suddenly, the SF25 behaved as if it had two souls, one docile in the straight and another unpredictable in support. The lethal combination of a poorly designed rear pull rod suspension, coupled with the loss of structural integrity of the chassis, resulted in a paradox. The car at certain times seemed competitive, but in reality, it was only when conditions did not push its weaknesses to the limit. In a calendar with more than 20 Grand Prix, with a variety of asphalts, temperatures and circuit geometries, the chances of this defect manifesting itself were inevitable, and they demonstrated. In the form of piloting errors, setup errors, unexpected degradations, but all with a common origin. A bad base. This is the real drama for Ferrari in 2025. It was not only surpassed by rivals. She was betrayed by her own machine. A machine that lied in the wind tunnel, that deceived the engineers, that silenced its pilots. Until Hamilton exposed her. For Charles Leclerc, the revelation of the structural failure of the SF25 was not simply another technical fact. It was an emotional blow that had been months in the making. Throughout the season, he had lived with a feeling that he himself could not translate into words. At certain moments, on certain circuits, the car seemed to have a life of its own. There were curves in which I had to brake earlier than usual, others in which I felt vibrations that no engineer could replicate in simulations. He faced unpredictable moments that he attributed to his own mistakes, because that's how the mind of an elite driver works. Before blaming the car, he blames himself. And that's where the psychological fracture began. Every time he raised his voice in a technical meeting, he was met with responses that sounded more like excuses than explanations. They told him that these sensations were a consequence of small aerodynamic imbalances, an overly aggressive configuration, or even his natural tendency to attack corners beyond the limit. None of those explanations quite fit, but Leclerc was always loyal. He was always the driver who trusted his team even when the evidence suggested otherwise. But when he saw the telemetry of Hamilton's car after Abu Dhabi, everything fell into place with brutal clarity. The SF25 did not suffer from a tuning problem. It suffered from a structural defect that compromised the physical integrity of those who dared to push it to the limit. Suddenly, all those disturbing moments he experienced during the season began to line up in his head like pieces of a sinister puzzle. He understood that he had raced for months with a car that could fail without warning, in any fast corner, in any Grand Prix, with no room to correct it. This painful validation also reignited another wound: the emotional burden of representing Ferrari. Leclerc always assumed his role as more than a responsibility. It was a family legacy, a childhood dream, a personal mission. But now that dream was beginning to transform into an internal struggle between his love for the team and the growing doubt about whether Ferrari can protect him as much as he has protected Ferrari's identity. This is the point where emotional suffering mixes with sporting reality. Because Leclerc is not only looking for a fast car. Look for an honest car. One that reacts as it should. One that responds to your talent instead of putting it in check. He understood that his entire 2025 season had an invisible enemy that he could not control. And now that the truth has come to light, the challenge for Ferrari is not just to fix the car. It is regaining the trust of a driver who has given everything for them, even when the team let him compete without the appropriate tool. Validation arrived, but it did not bring peace. It brought up a question that will resonate in Maranello for a long time. How is trust rebuilt when the pilot discovers that his intuition was correct, and that no one listened to him? The arrival of Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari was announced as a rebirth, as the union between the maximum experience and the greatest automotive myth in the world. For many, it was the perfect formula to win again. But few anticipated that, before aspiring to victories, his presence would uncover the team's deepest seams. From the first day in Maranello, Hamilton did not enter as a figurehead. He came in as an agent of transformation. Accustomed to Mercedes methodologies, where every detail is scrutinized and every anomaly is investigated to the point of exhaustion, he encountered a technical culture that was more emotional than analytical, more reactive than preventive. And that was a train wreck from the start. At Team Mercedes, Hamilton had an environment where his sensitivity as a driver was considered an engineering tool. At Ferrari, at first, his comments were received with courtesy but not urgency. The team structure was used to living with uncertainty, to finding solutions on the fly, to explaining errors with rhetoric. But Hamilton doesn't tolerate that mentality. He demands answers, demands facts, demands immediate action. That difference in technical culture became internal tension. Because every time Hamilton reported an anomaly, the team had to re-review data that they already considered closed. Each of his comments forced us to question decisions that had been made months ago. In an environment where many decisions are shielded by hierarchy rather than evidence, that was dynamite. What happened in the Abu Dhabi tests was the breaking point. While for most of the team it was just another data collection session, for Hamilton it was a test of veracity. He went out onto the track with the intention of pushing the car to the limit, not to find times but to confirm his suspicions. And he confirmed them in the crudest way, with a ruling that ended with his car destroyed, but with the truth completely exposed. That day, what for Ferrari was a blurry suspicion became irrefutable evidence. The effect was immediate. The technical department panicked. The internal hierarchies began to shake. The wind tunnel staff was urgently summoned. The simulations team was forced to reanalyze all the data from the season. What was once an internal debate about the peculiar behavior of the car became a full forensic investigation of the SF25. In Maranello, those questions fell like projectiles. And the figure of Hamilton stopped being that of the savior who comes to restore glory, to become the catalyst for a structural fracture. Because at the same time that it put the car in check, it also called into question the team's technical management capacity. For Frédéric Vasseur, this represented his biggest challenge since taking office. Because its big bet, the incorporation of Hamilton, was revealing everything that the team had tried to contain for years. An outdated organizational model, a development structure disconnected from the reality on the track, and a culture that normalized error under the umbrella of tradition. The car can be repaired. Aerodynamics can be adjusted. But the real reconstruction is happening behind closed doors. In the uncomfortable silence of offices where excuses are no longer allowed. In labs where every number is checked twice. In meetings where it is no longer enough to say, everything is under control. Because now they have someone who, with a single sentence, can collapse an entire narrative. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.